in any case, I see that our guest has
We have a
joined us.
guest. Can I introduce him, Shannon?
Yes, I want you to.
Okay, this man is so accomplished. I'm just going to read his bio here. Alex Filstein. He's an award-winning inventor in Canada's energy sector, and his innovations focus on emission-reducing technologies to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. How impressive is that?
Love
He is
it.
also the author of a newly published book. It's called Apollo Autism, and it focuses on autism acceptance and advancement towards a happier future in autism families. He's the administrator of a Facebook group called Autism Stories. He lives in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, with his wife, and he has 2 young sons who are on the autism spectrum. Welcome to the show, Alex.
You.
There he is.
Great
Yeah.
to have you here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really
What an
appreciate it.
impressive bio you have.
Yeah, I was just talking about propane and butane up until 5 minutes ago. Uh, and no, for sure. And now I'm here, so I'm really excited to be with you.
You're
Well,
going to
we're really
switch
glad to
gears.
have you. Alex, we'd like to start with your personal journey. Having 2 young sons on the spectrum, what that is like, that experience is like for you, and the fact that you were diagnosed with autism as an adult.
Yeah, for sure. My son was diagnosed in 2014, and it was quite a journey. Like other parents, I didn't really know what was going on. He was nonverbal back then, extremely steamy boy. Um, Having like pica, so eating just random objects, right? Like going through that entire journey. Even today, he still has like a toy. He calls it a manta shrimp. He's like it's like made out of pipe cleaners, and he kind of walks with it everywhere and kind of steams with it.
Hmm.
And so I went through this journey, which took a lot of kind of acceptance, growth, and development on my part. And we all know how autism dads, they don't really talk about this. Autism moms, they have those big communities. So, and then 4 years later, I went through it once again because my second son was diagnosed on the spectrum as well. At which point we received the diagnosis. I personally received it in a way kind of like, oh, okay, want to go for dinner? What want to go to a restaurant? And it was super easy. And so I was thinking, what can I do in the community to make it more for the new autism dads, a little bit more like my second time versus my first time. And I started volunteering, doing autism dad Zooms, and it kind of got me to think about the macro picture. How can I make more impact? And that's why I wrote this book called Apollo Autism.
And I really want to talk about Apollo Autism and about what break it down for us. Because I understand you're somebody who is very interested in space. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm interested in space, and part of my thing, like, by the way, I was also diagnosed on the spectrum
Yeah.
after my kids were diagnosed, so which explains why I know everything about the Apollo lunar landing program. I knew everything like about the dates. I would just read the patents for technology advancement that took place. Everything from microwaving to diapers, diapers in space. I never knew why I liked patents. I have 13 patents myself, working for a super major oil producer, cutting emissions. I have millions of pounds over cutting CO2 emissions in reality, which kind of resulted in that obsession being able to really execute on my ideas, what I have in mind. And it kind of brought things to somewhat of a closure for me personally, because when I was little, I would just sit and like just read. I would just observe kids, and it never was a topic because my parents, they're Ashkenaz Jews, like from East Europe, right? I grew up in Israel. I've been in Canada for over 20 years now, and it never was a thing. We never knew why I was this way, and no, we never talked about this. And only when my kids were diagnosed, we started looking into my past, and I was like, really? I didn't really play with any kids when when I was little. That's different. Um, so that's kind of my personal growth. But about the book, yeah, the book focuses on an engineer that lives through the Apollo program in between 1967 and 1972, and he has a similar journey to mine, having two kids on the spectrum. And most of us know about the Apollo program. We know about Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, but we don't know the journey the Apollo program had to go through in iterative way to overcome significant challenges and go phase by phase until they reach their goal. And so this engineer is working in the Apollo program, and this is an historic fiction based on real events. And he kind of learns to overcome his challenges having autistic kids as the program progresses, and he kind of comes to a conclusion of acceptance. But I'm not going to ruin the book. But in overall, it's mainly about maybe accelerating acceptance for moms and dads, and show them some of the historic past of how it used to be back then. And how it used to be is that everybody, like, the blame was on the mothers. Can you imagine, you go today, your kid gets diagnosed with autism, and you're like, you know what, actually, sorry, but it's kind of your fault. You're just too cold to your child. That started with Dr. Leo Connor back in 1943, advanced further in 1959 through Joey the Mechanical Boy with Dr. Bruno Bettelheim. And so even in the 60s, as the humanity were going to the moon, landing on the moon, autistic kids were looked at as it's the parents' fault, and you guys are kind of strange. And acceptance in school was not a thing. Diversity and inclusion was like, if you're diverse, you're just like, we don't accept you. So I write a lot about this in the book in the hope that the parents of today can also see what it used to be back then.
Yeah, I mean, just what a tragedy that so many mothers, uh, went to their graves feeling like they were to blame. They were called refrigerator mothers. It was just
Yeah,
absolutely unbelievable,
and
right?
and it's not like a year or two. We're talking decades of those
Right.
type of realities. And then who would question that? Because it's like, well, 10 years ago it used to be that way, 20 years. So what changes now, right?
Yeah.
And
Um,
yet, and yet I feel like, as you were saying, that, we don't hear from the dads very much. We hear from the moms. I feel like the moms compensated by creating a tribe, and the moms all talk to each other. And a lot of times I feel like now the dads are just left out, left off the table, pushed to the sidelines. I mean, I've been saying all week, Alex, that we were so thrilled to have you on. And I always say, because I love to hear from the dads. It's amazing and a little still rare for us to hear from a dad. And you think that the dads, and I think Nancy does too, the dads have a particular important part of this. Talk to us about what role you think the dads need to take.
yeah. So first of all, as I was investigating what was taking place historically, we know about, like, the first case for autism from Leo Connors. It was Donald Triplett, right? Donald Triplett. And what I read, what really fascinating to me, is that I read about in Leo Connors' investigation how he looked at the parents as well, and I could see a little bit of myself in that father. I think Donald Triplett's father was autistic.
Wow.
And I think many autism parents today, um, they could be also on the spectrum. I mean, think about this. In California right now, 1 in 26 kids is on the spectrum in every classroom. But if you look further into the data, is 1 in 16 boys. It's not like 1 in 44. It's not 2.3%. It's 4% of that population in California. But then you have 2 kids in every classroom that are boys on the autistic spectrum. And so I think, first of all, that the autism is not rare. I think it's time for autism dads to get kind of more educated on this topic and come to the communities, just like closer to what I'm trying to create, and talk about this openly, and know that you're not alone, that this is not a journey that is still is stigmatized, that there's an element of acceptance here, and it comes through community. And I see moms are doing an amazing job in this area, learning from each other, kind of creating those friendships. And I think there's a lot of rooms for dads here to also kind of inherit some of those vibes, and know that they're not alone. And so that's kind of how I think about dads. I mean, I talk openly about my diagnosis, about my children at work. There were many people that came from the company like, hey, Alex, me too, me too. There's this kind of me too kind of, and we talk about things and we learn different strategy and how you um, cope with things, cope with the stigma, cope with the kind of develop more acceptance. And just final thoughts on this. I think like autistic children, they don't really require perfect parents, but these children need accepting and happy parents who will support and love them. And so that's kind of um, where I'm at on this topic.
I love it.
Alex, is your Facebook group Autism Stories about giving support to others?
Well, initially, I started this group because we were doing dad's autism dad zooms, getting the dads on the zooms, and I figured, well, we'll just start a group, because nobody, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, okay, a group, a page, I don't know, just launch something, and then it kind of grew, and obviously, there's all kind of people, autism moms and family members and some greasy people that trying to promote like so that's kind of how it started. But I think I'm a solutions guy, so I would execute something in the field, cut emissions. You tell me, hey, we need to reduce emissions, global warming, climate change. We need a solution to do this. So I'll go to an oil field and I'll propose a solution and we'll cut emissions. I'm just very literal that way. And so when I saw like that, what I went through with my first son in his diagnosis, I'm like, well, this is not. There's a gap here between how I responded to this event because I discovered the world, but there's this community out there that know, like you, right, Nancy, Shannon, you're the community, you know everything about this. So if I had access to you, you would just accelerate this journey for me for being able to relate to kind of what you went through and learn some of the ways maybe and even today in the data we have from people, for example, in Utah they took 8-year-olds, and 8-year-olds they looked at IQ, intellectual disability, and about I think it was like 27% of the autistic kids had intellectual disability. They did the same with the 4-year-olds, and about 60% had intellectual disability. So what we have today is that we have parents that are hearing from the community saying, well, your son has intellectual disability, but about 30% of those kids will not have this intellectual disability in like 4 years later. So we have this big gap in communication and the way we measure things, in the data we receive. So I think there's this huge importance about being part of a community and really understanding that what you're told is not like exactly how, because ADDM network, CDC, they're also trying to learn about what's happening here, right?
So,
Amazing.
Alex, based on your experience being on the spectrum yourself and having two sons on the spectrum, what advice would you give to parents then of newly diagnosed kids?
Yeah, and I talk a lot about this in my book. I think if you were, let's say, in grade 5, and I give you a PhD degree, and I say, hey, go teach university. I mean, that's just like, that's a huge macro event, right? And you're not able to do it because you didn't go through this process of graduating high school, going doing bachelor's degree, getting your master's, PhD, and now you can teach. I feel like sometimes, like in the autism diagnosis, uh, well, we were told kind of like, well, just continue to love him. It's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Good luck, And this is a big macro event that takes place. And I feel like the advice I would give parents is that don't look at it this way. Look at it as an iterative process as you phase into the future that takes time, and you will find happiness and acceptance. You will find it. It's just don't look at it as a one big event like it just happens to you, which is what usually happens. And in the book I really describe it as phase by phase process where this character is going through and he learns, right? Because I'll give you an example. Apollo 1, January 1967, the entire crew vanished in Florida on the pad. Roger Chaffee, Ed White, Gus Grissom. There was a fire on the pad. Uh, 1969, July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin landing on the moon. Something happened over those 2 years, and I'm not comparing autism by any means to any of those incidents. There was an iterative process to say, okay, let's improve, let's try this. Okay, this didn't work. Let's go to the next stage. And you iterate as you go. And that's kind of how I saw my life because I'm so obsessed with that program. That's kind of how I saw my son development. That's how I looked at my second son, just very patiently iterating phase by phase, advancing forward. And I think this really helped me to be in a position where I'm somewhat of a leader in the community now. I openly talk about this. I go to dads, people that, still kind of afraid of this topic, and I talk to them about it. And somehow it makes sense to me where you break it to smaller pieces. It makes sense. And of course, not being judgmental, not saying, oh, do this is wrong, this is right. Just more of a kind of supporting element. I think the moms are doing an amazing job in this area because you guys are naturally patient and kind of warm. I don't know how to explain it, but the dads they're a little bit, there's a little bit of that kind of old school mentality, kind of, oh, I'm gonna fix it. Things are, we will
Yeah.
get over it.
A
I'm in
lot,
control.
a lot of dads. I mean, I think of Rodney Peete, Holly Robinson Pete's husband, who wrote a book called "Not My Boy." A lot of dads in the beginning, and I know my own husband was in denial in the beginning and had a really hard time with the diagnosis. It's like they think, well, I'm not going to have the baseball player, the football player, the scholar. This is not going to happen for me now. It's the end of a dream. So it is, I think, tough for many, many fathers.
It's true, and but reality is that I'm also not going to be a baseball player. I'm
Right.
not going to be landing on the moon anytime soon.
Are you
Uh,
sure?
yeah, I'm
Are you
sure.
sure?
I'm sure. So maybe that expectation of, I don't end up at point A, but I will end up in this point B, and being a little bit more flexible, agile, just kind of iterating phase by phase over time, not being like rigid on anything. It requires a lot of kind of fluid flexibility on the parent's part and just kind of supporting your child. I also very passionate about the divorce rate in the community. I don't know exactly what it is, but at the time where your child needs the most support, parents, there's this element of, well, maybe it's from your side, maybe it's from your grandmother's uncles, like this is so unproductive and nobody really needs those conversations. But I just know that that's how it is in the community, and we can do better by having the conversations like this. And you know what? Like, more flexibility, more agility. It's not a simple topic, but if we break it to smaller pieces, we can overcome the challenges as we advance.
I love this example that you're setting for people over the world, especially for dads, Alex. I'm sure that people are going to ask, though. You're so capable. You're, you're clearly brilliant, and you're clearly an amazing dad. And yet, since your children were diagnosed, you got a diagnosis, and so forgive me, but I think people are wondering, like, what are the challenges that led you, and if it's too personal, please feel free to say I don't want to answer, but I think it would be helpful for us to know what are the kinds of things that led you to realize, oh, maybe I don't, because maybe you think differently, but to go and get a diagnosis of a disorder, what made you think I might qualify for that?
Well, first of all, like, I always was told that my thinking, I use a lot of analogies, a lot of examples, like lots of metaphors. Like every time I would talk, I would just use a lot of kind of third party things. What really made me want to go and get the diagnosis, or at least look into it, is really my wife, because I really wanted to show her that I can be more supportive, more in place, because I tickle on a lot of things. Like I will be very obsessed about my work and just really dedicate to that. And so she could be like waiting for me, and I'm thinking about other things, right? I could be looking at like some ticker, like and then looking at some data for hours, reading like Apollo pattern. So I know it's just something. It's a big part of me, but I had to, like, I don't want to get divorced. I want my kids to have a family. I love my wife. She loves me. So I wanted to have disclosure. And the more I educated myself on this topic, the more I'm like, wait a second. There's no way I'm neurotypical. There's no way. I even did like a Google test on like, and I'm like way to the right, you know.
Yeah.
So I just went and met with a psychologist that specializes in ASD diagnosis, and she was like, "Whoa, what took you so long?" Like, so that was a surreal event, but I really wanted to bring my wife and be like, "Hey, see, like that's why I go to the community and I talk about autism all the time, and that's why I look at this data because I just don't know how not to, like because I see an opportunity here to share this knowledge." Where typically I think people will be like, okay, sounds good. I'll just, go watch a baseball game or something. So
Well, I love it. I love that you have this persistence that it can be better and that you're working on it. I always say, don't I, Nancy? I say, well, hopefully brighter minds than mine are working on it. Alex, I think you're an infinitely brighter mind, and
thank you. You're too kind. You're too kind.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're working on it.
Yes.
How are you? I'm sorry, Nancy. How are your boys doing now?
Yeah. So my sons, they're 7 and 11, just like the store. Seven and
Mm.
see.
I
No,
like it.
they're doing well, and and again, if I had certain expectations of how they would do, I could have been in a different place, me personally. But I'm just really glad that we're making this progress. I'm part of this on this journey with them, right? And I accept of who they are, accept of who I am. I understand. I'm educated on this topic. I know that autism didn't just happen like last year or 2 years ago, or we see like high prevalence rates because all of a sudden, like things were evolving over time. Things are happening, right? And so I'm mindful of that. I'm mindful of my journey with my sons, and we're continuing on this journey. And that's kind of what I write about in the book because it is a journey. And you start in a certain place, you have triumphs, you have defeats, but for example, when my son was 5 years old, he just used to go to playground, eat bunch of rocks. So he would just put those rocks in his mouth. Then I'll go to my wife and be like, "How many you think he ate? How many?" Like I would have those conversations, and she like, "Dude, like, what are you talking about? We need to go to the hospital, right?" But
Wow.
now he doesn't do that anymore, and so that's a win, and I will take that win. And if he's a little bit delayed on his school, or maybe 3 4 grades behind, it's okay because there's next year and there's this year. So keeping that kind of flexible mind and open minded about progress over time, which is really important.
I love it.
Well, Alex, you are so enlightened. And I think both mothers and fathers can benefit from your knowledge and what you've shared with us today. It's
Thank
my
you.
hope that during this hour, we've had some fathers listening, and maybe you've helped to change some of their perceptions of their own journeys.
Thank you, Nancy.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Where can we get the book, Alex? That's the next question.
Well, I'm publishing for Autism Month because like I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I just spent like 2 years writing this book, and now I need to like market, and I'm not very good at marketing. But I think there's a lot of value for parents. By the way, I'm donating all net proceeds to Ukrainian children. It's
Mm.
heartbreaking what's happening. From the sales I already raised $600 that were donated right away. I intend to do so this year as well. So it's on Amazon. It's there. I'm very proud of this book. I think it's an important one. I think it provides a story of autism in the late 1960s. It's a dad that has no idea what's landing on him, and he's trying to basically land in a better spot. And it's an inspiring story. It was really important for me to tell this story. And I think it will inspire many people. So it's on Amazon. It's called Apollo Autism. So the Apollo journey and the autism journey that just happened to interconnect phase by phase, just like I'm trying to do in my life right now.
There it is, Apollo Autism. And I have to ask, I mean, obviously, have you been able to go to NASA? Have you been on the tour? Have you seen a launch? Like, are you? How into this are you?
A lot. I'm really, I'm really into it. Um, I'm more obsessed with the patents. I learned so much to the point
Patent.
that I can understand why the inventor did the patent. It's really strange to share with you, but I can see if the inventor did it to keep his job even, because I
Mm.
can relate the dates to kind of like, well, is he just trying to add value, or this is like a legit technology that's going to be advanced? So I think I kind of see those perspectives in a little bit different light, but and I don't really, I'm not like a rocket science guy in a way, even though I have a degree in geomatics engineering. I just like the element of learning from that iterative process where you develop something and it ends up working.
Yeah.
So, and that's what really worked with me and my children, because I can tell you, like, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be happy and in a good place, and my children will benefit from it.
There you go. I am a big fan of the Apollo program, but I don't know nearly as much as you do. But it was a very big deal to me a couple of years ago. I got to go down um, to Houston, and my son and I got to tour the international, where they have the International Space Station, the control room, and everything. And then we just like turned a corner and they walked us into the room where the control room from the Apollo missions, and there you are, you're there, and in the room where that all happened, and I just started to cry, Alex. I just had this emotional response because my dad was really into the Apollo programs. It was so unexpected, but I just stood there and cried for the opportunity to be there. There was like a coffee stain on the carpet, and I kept thinking, who spilled that coffee that has been there for all of these years? And it was just a big. And then as a result of that, a couple of years later, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Temple Grandin.
Of course,
We
yeah.
we took her to back there. They gave her a tour. We got to go with her for the entire day with 5 astronauts, and she got a tour from 5 astronauts while we filmed. At some point we have to put out a mini documentary about that.
Well,
But
I wish I was there. Yeah.
right? Well, if I ever get the film out, then you can feel like you were there for the day. But I thought that I was going to come out of my skin because I wanted someone to commemorate that it was just this amazing day of being a geek about the space program. And well, I'll tell you what else was amazing was they asked if Temple would speak during the lunch hour to all the employees of NASA, and she said, I would love to do that. How many seats are in the space where you're going to put me? And they said, oh, we're just going to put you in the small room where there's like 100 chairs. And she said, that won't work, you better get a bigger space. And they were like, well, it's lunchtime and people don't really, come to all the speaker series. And she said, get the bigger room. And they have on the complex a big theater. And they said, all right, but we wanted to fill up for you. There was standing room only because so many of the employees, as you were saying, they were like, I have a grandchild, or I have 3 kids, or I think it was news to NASA how many people were working for them or have family members or believe that they themselves are on the spectrum. It was kind of an amazing moment to see.
Well, and statistically, I think we're just like in the first innings of what's on that autism journey, because how many neurodiverse people working right now at NASA? Out of the 400,000 people that worked in the for the Apollo program, those were not like just typical neurotypical brains, right? There was a lot of diversity in there. And so I really wanted to capture that story of that engineer. It was so important to me to show his life and what happens to him on his journey and the triumphs. And we all know Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
Houston, we have right? And so
Yeah.
I'm kind of integrating all of those events, and he's basically, and how did they, basically came up with solutions to proceed despite the challenges. And I think it's not really, for me, it's the technical element. It's about that human spirit, our ability to overcome challenges and really converge to a place where we achieve our goals and become happier.
Amazing. Well, Alex, thank you so much. Traven, let's
Thank
once
you.
again show them where they can get the book. And if people want to follow the group that you have on Facebook, where do they need to go for that?
Well, I have a very open profile on Facebook. It just you can add me as a friend or follow me, or Autism Stories on Facebook,
Okay.
and that's about it. I'm a simple guy. Yeah.
Wonderful. And there is the book again, Apollo Autism. Make sure that you check that out. Alex, you're an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much for being with us.
You definitely are, Alex. This has been a wonderful conversation. We're so glad you could join us today on the show.
And I really appreciate you. I watch you, Nancy. I watch you, Shannon. Thank you so much for being advocates and leaders in this community. And you deserve a lot of credit for pioneering this for us. And so
Likewise.
now we're joining you as well and trying to do our best to build a better future for our community. So thank you for
Thank
this
you.
opportunity.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Have a
Good day.
great day.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.